Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to one of the more precious poems of Leaves of Grass for a number of reasons in 303. Oh Me, Oh Life, poem number 9 of the 29 poems of By the Roadside. We will dedicate this set of comments to the great Robin Williams, who tragically we have now lost. Of course, you're familiar with, I hope, the film Dead Poets Society. We've mentioned it a few times in Williams Keating, at the 1989 offering, where in that film he will recite a good part of this poem. And it became one of those hallmark moments when art recreates art, and everybody wanted to run down, what is that set of lines? And of course, the photograph of Walt Whitman hanging in Keating's room, and so much has been made of the inspiration of 303 from that film and of course from Williams' great performance. Now our assumption is that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net. Down the left hand side, Talks with Walt, beginning with that set of comments from inscriptions. We're gonna reference several times, starting from Pomenac here in this set of comments. We have given as well an introductory set of comments to By the Roadside, and we just finished with the little brief observation poem, Perfections. Now, Norton's will tell us that this poem appeared in the 1865-66 sequel to Drum Taps and remained unchanged until Leaves of Grass 1881, when the word will in the last line was changed to may. And that's interesting in and of itself, and we'll maybe have to comment on this one. Now, I have made the argument that Leaves of Grass is in some way a sustained Theodicy, the last of our big five: epistemology, ontology, the first two; psychology, sociology, the second two; and finally Theodicy, the question of why must terrible and bad things happen? Standing behind all of Leaves of Grass in the deathbed edition, of course, was the worst imaginable historical event of really bad stuff happening, which was, of course, the American Civil War. And we're obviously getting ready for that here in a few minutes as we pick up Drum Taps and Memories of Lincoln. Let's look at the poem now and enjoy the compelling use of dialogue. I think Plato's Republic and the dialogues of Plato stand behind a whole bunch of this poem. O me, O life, of the questions of these reoccurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, of myself, forever reproaching myself, for who more foolish than I, and who more faithless, of eyes that vainly crave the light, of the object's mean, of the struggle ever renewed, of the poor results of all, of the plodding and sordid crowds I see around me, of the empty and useless years of the rest, with the rest me intertwined. The question, oh me, so sad reoccurring, what good amid these, oh me, oh life? Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. Now we're going to begin right away with the observations that the word questions gets used in Song of Myself, passage 46. You are asking me questions, I hear you, I must answer, I cannot answer, you must find out for yourself. We've given, of course, a full exegesis of 46. Some of you continue to say, you keep coming back to that set of lines. I do, because I think that's the heart in many ways of Leaves of Grass, and here we come back to the heart. What is it that great artists do? Well, they're always interested in, of course, the questions. This is why we say Shakespeare is so great. Why? Because he asks and sometimes answers the great questions of life. And this is one of those moments when Whitman asks, what is the point of it all? It's the Theodicy question. What is the point of it all? The questions that reoccur. Notice we'll come back to the word reoccurring one more time at the end of this poem. And then we're going to get 10 of these, depending on how you count it, 9, 10, of these of statements. That is to say, let me tell you what I see life is all about. Endless trains of the faithless. I think standing behind this as well is that famous set of lines from Hamlet, Act 3, the to be or not to be speech. And you'll remember that great list of all of those terrible things, right? The proud man's contumely, despise love, all of that. In other words, Whitman says, all these terrible things are happening in my life. What's the point of all of it? I think Whitman is playing a Hamlet-like question-answer game here. Endless trains of the faithless, cities filled with the foolish. We've certainly seen these cities. I mean, go back, any number of poems immediately come to mind from Leaves of Grass, but, you know, Song of the Open Road comes to mind. So many of these kinds of questions. Brooklyn Ferry obviously comes to mind. Cities filled with the foolish of myself. Notice he goes from the big, a bunch of people to himself. Myself forever. We're back to reoccurring. Forever reproaching myself. We've seen this so many times in Leaves of Grass, this self-reproaching, where he challenges himself. What is wrong with you? That kind of thing, right? Forever reproaching myself. Of course, it's funny that Song of Myself will immediately come to mind here. And then in parentheses, which makes us think of this parenthetics that we've seen so many times in Leaves of Grass, and obviously it makes us think of our Emily Dickinson. For who more foolish than I, and who more faithless? I love this about Whitman, right? Some have called him like a useless optimist. I'm like, no, he's an informed optimist. He has his hope. He has his optimism, as he says he saw the sunny side of life. But he also recognized just how unbelievably foolish and how unbelievably faithless he can be. I love this about Whitman because he's never pointing the finger. You're a fool. You're a faithless. He says, I'm way worse than anybody else. And obviously the question of value is standing behind all of this. Of eyes, oh man, is this brilliant. His adaptation or his borrowing from Plato's Republic, especially the cave allegory of Republic 7. We've given full lectures on it at learnstrong.net. Of eyes that vainly crave the light, of the objects mean. We've seen this word mean. It usually means like low or silly or foolish, back to the earlier word. Of the struggle ever renewed. You remember this from Song of the Open Road, passage 14. Go back and look at it. The struggles. He loves that word. Of the poor results of all. In other words, it seems like no matter what anybody tries, it's a waste of time and it's useless. Of the plotting and sordid crowds I see around me. Sordid only gets used one time in all Leaves of Grass, and it's right here. This I see, of course, takes us to by the roadside, all of these reflections of things to see around him. That is to say, I take my walks down, down Broadway or wherever, and I just see all of these people, and I have to ask myself, what is the point of all of it, right? Of the, notice, empty and useless years. Believe it or not, this is the one time useless years gets used in all of Leaves of Grass. Useless years of the rest, with the rest, me, intertwined. Now we're going to see intertwined one other time at the end of Leaves of Grass, a little poem called Life and Death. But think about the power of that picture of intertwined. We saw this when we were messing around with those early poems of Song of Myself. That growing, that vines, that weaving motif, as we said, that I think he learned from Homer's, especially Homer's Odyssey. Go back and look at our full lectures on the Odyssey and notice how I craft a whole bunch of my comments about the Odyssey around that idea of weaving. Of course, we think of Penelope and her weaving, right? And then he comes back to it, only now it's question, not questions. Did you see that? It's brilliant, the way he plays the game. The question, oh me, exclamation point. So sad, reoccurring. And then the use of the dash. It's quite useful here, the way he uses the dash. What good amid these, oh me, oh life. Now, of course, the fact that he uses the word good will take the readers of Whitman's day, not so many today, but certainly at Whitman's day, when they see this word good, they immediately go to the book of Genesis and the Bible and the opening lines of Genesis 1. God saw that it was good. God saw that it was good. This idea of good here is a loaded word. Obviously, it's a very Platonist word. In other words, what's the question? Now put it in your own words. What's the question at level 1? What's the point? What is the point? I mean, come on. It's insane that I have to put up with all of this. Takes us back to Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, where he will ask the same question in the morning when you wake up. You're going to be what? Met with who? What's he saying in Meditations 2? You're going to be met with what? The busybody, the fools. The fools. That is to say, I do not understand what the point of all of this is. That's the question. And then notice, taking us back to Song of Myself, 46 again, notice here we will have just simply the word answer. It's fascinating that it's answer, period, not colon. Answer. NX, and again, it's italicized. Taking us again back to Song of Myself 46, you'll remember, and my spirit said, you'll remember when we become the enfolders of all this, and my spirit said, and then out of 10 ofs, we then get to 3 that's. In other words, we're not going to come to an answer. This is almost like reading Plato's Phaedo, when right before he drinks the hemlock, his students want to talk with him about why it is he's so giddy. What is the point of your happiness right now? And of course, he'll talk about the soul and Phaedo. Notice here, it is a compelling 3-part answer. The balance here is just brilliant, which is why, again, we consider this such a precious poem. Because this is a universal question. I mean, it's fascinating the number of my students who think they have come up with an original question when they ask, what is the bloody point of all of this? I just don't see it. I don't see it. You spend so much energy. You waste so much time. And for what? The answer is tripartite. 3 that's. 1, that you are here. Now that is fascinating. The very fact of your existence is going to be central to Whitman's Theodicy. You exist. Or as we have often said, from the time they were young, they were teaching you the preciousness of your life when they told you at the park while you were swinging, you had to go to the van. I don't want to go to the van. I want to keep swinging. This is what most children will say. No, 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 honey. You can't stay at the park and swing forever. You got to go to the van. That is the most profound of lessons. You don't get to swing at the park forever, but you do get to swing at the park. You ain't met no 200-year-old people, which means obviously you don't get to swing at the park forever. You got to go to the van. And everybody's got to go to the van. Everybody's got to go. But you're here. You're at the park. You get to swing, or as he will say, you get to play. That's the first one. You're here. The second one, of course, builds off the first one. That life exists. Now, of course, the word life for Whitman is a loaded word. Go back and study the way and run it to ground the way he loves to use this word, life. That life exists, that is to say you're here, and identity. Now, you'll go back to starting from Paumanok 2 to see the word identity for the first time used. And of course, Whitman was constantly playing around with the idea of identity. That is to say, who do you identify with? We talk about the five P's of Whitman. How does he identify? Not just as person, but as politician, as pedagogue, poet, etc., philosopher. The final third is, of course, the most precious of some of the lines that Whitman ever wrote, because he takes us all the way back to Aristotle, to poetics. He takes us back to all of the great players, takes us back to Shakespeare, takes us back to Dante, and of course he's going to challenge us to think about the play, the Leela, the play, the powerful, and you'll remember this word used for the first time in Leaves of Grass. It's starting from Paumanok, passage 5. Go back and look at it, how he uses the word powerful. The powerful play goes on. By the way, at the very beginning of Leaves of Grass, in the poem To Thee, O Causes, you'll remember the play of causes. So he's been using this word play, in some ways setting us up for the moment that he gives it to now. The powerful play goes on. Notice that that word goes on is basically the word reoccurring. It's basically the word endless. In other words, whatever it is that you're going to call reoccurring and endless, oh, no, it keeps going. It is the nature of the play, the powerful play. Of course, in Song of Myself 46, it is a journey. It's walking, right? And in 47, it's swimming. At the end of 46, 47, it's swimming, right? Here, it's the powerful play goes on. And you, and then again, the change of the word, right? You may contribute a verse. Now, this idea that this poem must be read, and I think this is why those of us who love Robin Williams' interpretation in Dead Poets Society, it's an invitation. It's an invitation to, of course, sound the barbaric yawp of the conclusion of Song of Myself, and now we're going back, of course, to the great Williams and his performance in that classic film. The idea of the invitation. In other words, out of the question grows, Leaves of Grass, grows an answer that becomes an invitation. You are here, but what are you going to do with this moment in time? why not contribute? Why not contribute a verse to the powerful play? That is to say, contribute a couple of lines. And I think in a moment, Whitman is giving us two observations. Great artists are always about contributing. And they're always about invitations, inviting us to contribute. That is to say, it's not enough just to read Leaves of Grass. You got to live Leaves of Grass. You got to live your life. You got to contribute your verse. And of course, that contribution can be in your writing, but it can also be in any number of other ways. Certainly, Whitman would have thought of himself as contributing not just through his writing. At 2a, then, your contribution clearly matters. You got to believe that. Whitman says, you got to believe that. Out of all of that pain, something must grow. And of course, the great Indian Hindu word picture that influenced so much, I think, T.S. Eliot's, Bert Norton especially, and the lotus rose quietly, quietly, glittering out of the heart of light. That idea of the lotus that grows out of the mud. It's a beautiful word picture. At 2b, well, I love all of the ofs, the 10 ofs, and the 2 that's that lead to this dialogue form. And it is a dialogue form, right? In other words, it's as if we have the interlocutor at play here, and we're getting to kind of watch this. And you have Whitman's ability to say, I'm going to give you an answer to this. You may not like the answer, but it's the best answer I got. You gotta contribute. At least one verse. Do something before the end. Some work of noble note may yet be done, not unbecoming men that strove with God's is the way that Tennyson will say it in Ulysses. Speaking of Ulysses at 3, there are so many texts that come to mind. I've mentioned Plato's Republic 7, that craving the light and the longing to get out of the shadow, the shadow cave, the cave of shadows, and to understand what is real. Not just what exists, but what is real. And to that degree, I think we're being invited to contribute a real verse. Of course, we mentioned Dead Poets Society as well at 3a. Finally, at 3b, this is one of those few poems, and I think this is why it was such a powerful text to be used in Williams' performance in Dead Poets Society, because it has this tendency to kind of reach out to you, the reader, in profound ways. I mean, we obviously mentioned Brooklyn Ferry already, but this ability to kind of reach out and to just challenge you, the reader. Do you crave the light? Do you long for the light, even though often you don't get there? And then finally, and most importantly, and I think most preciously, I think we're at one of the most important set of lines in all of Leaves of Grass. I think that this is an answer to why are you reading Leaves of Grass and annotating every one of the poems, so that you can come to this poem and ask this simple question: what do I have to contribute? What will my verse be? What will my longing for a verse be in the powerful, oh yes, it is powerful play? Thank you.